There it goes.
Episode 146, Pete.
That's 146.
146. 146.
Welcome
We're
back,
ready,
folks.
man. Yep, good to have you. This is the Rebel's Edge, where we bring you Macro Minute, and we're probably going to have to change a little on the fly today, Pete, with the Macro Minute, because, man, all those halts, those trading halts of these regional banks, pretty scary stuff.
Yeah.
That's pretty much why the market's just getting clocked.
Mm-hmm.
But we do welcome you folks, Pete Najarian, John Najarian, Jared. We are delighted to have you here with us as the Dow sinks 500 points. Yes, S&P down 61, NASDAQ down about 150. Slight bottoms, I guess sort of the noon balloon, Pete, if you remember those old phrases, where we lift a little bit on down days and on up days you swoon a little bit, the noon swoon if it's an up day. We're definitely experiencing a little bit of the noon balloon right now. We'll see if it holds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's dive into the Macro Minute.
Let's do it.
March jolts, job openings, less than people thought. That's not good. It's another sign that the economy is slowing down. We don't want it to stutter to a stop, but the Fed will have something to say about that tomorrow, Pete?
Yeah, and you know what, John? I think the second we started even moving ourselves and our vision over towards the Fed, it definitely had an impact because everybody starts really looking at various numbers and they're seeing the numbers today, and the concerns are obviously very, very real at this point in time. There's a lot of fear out there, John, and it's not necessarily, I'm not talking about the VIX. Everybody calls it the fear index. It's not the fear index. It's an index that shows you what kind of movement to expect. Well, that movement has moved up dramatically from what were we, 15, 16? Now we're in the 18s. I mean, that's a nice little jump in a single day. So we are seeing that, John. You know, some of the manufacturing orders and that type of thing, that was up, but not nearly up as much as expected. So across the board, we're just looking at a lot of numbers that are just not putting it together right now for what people wanted to see. And what people wanted to see was something that looked a little bit different, but they're seeing some slowing, like you said, and that's not good.
Well, let's dive in, Pete, to fantastic futures.
I love gold.
Oh, that's right.
Fantastic futures.
That's out of hand.
A little bit of both, apparently. Fantastic futures and I love gold. Well, the I love gold part, of course, is from Gold Member, and the precious metal is up almost 10%, double digits on the year, Pete, and up about 1.33% so far today. So my pick, you were on silver yesterday. I'm on gold today.
Well, you know what? It's been metals, it's been energy, it's been different parts of the economy. We talk about copper once in a while, a lot less lately. But I'm going to go right back to energy, John, and here's why. 3 weeks ago, we were looking at crude. It was trading 83. Today, we're trading closer to 72. I mean, that's a pretty dramatic move in a very, very short period of time. I'll even throw in natural gas, down 4.5% today, at least early on. It's down 4.5%, but it's been in a relatively tight range, John, somewhere, call it between 2 and maybe 220, 221. But when you look at it, it's a lot like other parts of the market. Not a whole lot going on there, although today, a little bit of a hit, nothing big, but definitely energy, I think, is something worth a glance and keeping an eye on.
Well, Glenn, you'll be happy to hear that some of the Twitterati, the Twitter followers, are already responding to fantastic futures.
That's great.
And
Fantastic futures.
well, see, there you go.
There it is.
Apparently, it's one of the more popular segments, Pete.
Yeah.
But we did sort of promise that we'd say a little something about these regional banks, Pete, because they are getting clocked. PACW, which was a big winner for me when I bought it in March. Luckily, out of it as the April timeframe came around. And the stock of which we will not speak, FRC, got taken out which was, neither here nor there for me because I was already out after taking a lot of pain in that one. But WAL too, Pete, Western Alliance Bancorp. You look at either of those two giants, WAL or PacWest, and they both were just getting hammered and seeing stoppages. That's not good.
No, that's not good. Just real quick, and I know we got a lot to cover, John, but yeah, I mean, you look at Bank of Ozark, you look at Key Bank as well, Key Corp. Across the board, we're seeing regionals, and we're even seeing in the indexes themselves. There is a lot going on, and I think that there's a bit of a panic feel to it. Don't you think, John? I mean, when you see that many halts, when you see the volumes, when you see them all going down, cascading together, that says a lot. And we said this, John, and I continue to pat ourselves on the back, but a lot of people out there, including Jamie Dimon, said, well, I think this is it. It's probably over. There are no one-day events. There are no one stock events. They seem to continue to go for at least a little while longer. We had the big three, but I don't know that we're done yet, John. And unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of activity in the options world that signals to us that maybe it's not done, and there's a couple of names, and nobody's really sure which name it's going to be. So they're just going across the board and just selling.
Yep. Well, it seems like there's another shoe to drop, most likely, Pete. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about Chegg. Speaking of dropping, because CHGG, you and I talked about it when AI really came to the fore maybe 2 months ago, Pete. And we were saying, if you're somebody who gives kids in high school, college, university advice about, how to get a better education, a lot of that can be done by AI and ChatGPT. Well, guess what they cited today, Pete? They said, because of what's going on with ChatGPT, in the first part of the year, we saw a noticeable impact on our new account growth, and we are meeting expectations on new signups, but that doesn't mean that they're getting the revenue they need, Pete.
Yeah, you know what, John? It's amazing too, because one of the things that I don't think everybody fully understands here is when you look at this company, Chegg, the CEO just completely volunteered this information. This wasn't in a chat back and forth. This was him just delivering the earnings and then talking about what's going on. He said, beginning of the year, nothing, nada. That's it. All of a sudden in March, it kicked in, and that kicked in a big way, absolutely impacting new customer growth, all those kinds of things. It's just amazing how fast that turned, John, because there wasn't much concern, and now the concern is very high, and they are directly going right at it. So it's something pretty interesting. I will say this. When you look at the short interest of 10, 12% in this particular stock, John, it makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of smiles out there for those people who are short on a 50% move to the downside.
Yeah, indeed, Pete, indeed. And even though this kind of highlights one of the things, even about unusual activity, people had been waiting, apparently, Pete, for this news, but several of the puts that they'd purchased had expired by the time that news hit. So that's one of the things about options that we like to tell you guys about and warn you about. And that is, you don't have as much time to be right with an option as you do with the stock. That's just the nature of the beast. That's one of the trade-offs with options, but you don't get the leverage with the stock that you get with the options. All right, Pete. By the way, 34 million versus 3 million normal activity in Chegg. Ouch.
It's a little volume.
Let's take a look at Thoughtworks, TWKS, because this one, basically global technology consultancy is what they say they're all about, Pete. Still a nice 17 or 18% gain on the day. They're going to provide the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau professional IT and digital services, including web development. Pretty big deal for them because obviously the government can print all the money it wants, Pete. So if they're your customer, you got a pretty good customer.
I totally agree with you. That's where I was going too, John. And I think this is a magnificent partnership they've put together for this thing. And the fact that it's the government That's, that speaks volumes, because the government's always willing to overpay because it ain't their money, right? I mean, so it's always something, well, we'll figure out some way to get around this whole thing. I will add to this whole thing though, John, stock is up today. Matter of fact, last I looked, it was up somewhere 18-20%, something like that. But that being the case, it's up off of basically the 52-week low. So this is a stock that was really, really struggling. This might be something, I don't think necessarily just a Band-Aid. I think this actually is the parachute that just opened up, because they needed something like this. They're getting it. And anytime you've got a contract with the government, that's probably a good thing.
Indeed. Well, we certainly, that's not a stock that we follow as regularly as some of the others, but that doesn't mean it's not worth talking about.
Yep.
Let's talk about one, Pete, that I think you will be shocked when I show you this chart, because Jared's got a chart for us of TAP, which is Molson Coors. And you look at that, folks, the upper line that's up 27%, that's Molson Coors. And the lower line that's down 4% in the last month, that's Budweiser. So when you see that, Pete, so Budweiser's been hurt by that campaign with Dylan Mulvaney, that person that basically people really sort of got turned off by a light beer backing a transgender. Look at it however you want, folks. I'm giving you the dollars and cents of it, not making a judgment on Dylan, but I am saying Budweiser, yeah, it slipped 4%, but guess who probably got most of that light beer money, Pete? Yeah. Molson Coors. Yeah. And that's why that stock's up 27% in the past month.
You're right about that. And how about the additional jump off of earnings where they get 54 cents? They were supposed to be 26 cents, John. They were 29 cents a year ago. So they've got growth. And this is not just them taking some of that business. They absolutely are. There's no doubt about it from Budweiser. They're the one picking up that side of it. But when you look across the board, I mean, Coors is doing what seems to be almost everything right. That's why the stock is sitting up there, John, near the highs, near those 52-week highs. It's been a terrific run. I don't think it's done. And the reason I say that is, despite everything else, all the moves and everything, John, the strength, and you look at the PE of this, it's still really low. As a matter of fact, it's low relative to almost any measurement going back. So they got the growth on the revenue. They've got the growth on the, obviously on the earnings, and they just continue to beat. And oh, by the way, they've come out with something, John, that I'll bet nobody out there really knows much about yet, but we might all be knowing about it in the future, because if you're a country type guy, or if you're somebody who likes whiskey, Coors has got their own whiskey coming out. And that seems to be something that might be pretty daggone good. I like what they're doing. They're expanding, and they're making the company a little bit different than it once was.
Indeed. This is one of those situations, Pete, where, somebody else's misstep, like perhaps Coke versus Pepsi, or in this case, of course, Budweiser and all of its brands, including that Bud Light scandal, against Molson Coors, which is symbol TAP. Mm-hmm. And they definitely tapped into a gold vein there, Pete, because manna from heaven. Yeah. They didn't have a chance to screw this one up. People just came flocking for Coors and Molson products rather than Budweiser. All right, let's hit Sprouts Farmers Market, Pete, because this one came out with first quarter or Q1 results. Top line, bottom line not only increased year over year, but beat consensus estimates. You and I both know that usually means you move up. And this one certainly is so far today.
John, there's a massive short in this particular name as well. So that doesn't hurt at all, because, I'm very familiar with this. We go there all the time. We think it's fantastic. Yes, the prices are a little bit higher probably than most, but you're getting a little bit of something for that. I'll tell you what, John, when I'm looking and I see e-commerce sales up 12% and I see same store sales that are rising 3 or 4%, that's just exactly what you're wanting to have happen. This is a company that I think has really done a lot of things right over a long period of time. They're out of Phoenix. A lot of people don't know this company. They probably never even seen it, but I'll tell you, very, very interesting, kind of a bit of a Whole Foods sort of a feel with the wine section and all that stuff within the store. they knocked the cover off the ball. They had a great quarter, and I think that's why we're seeing what we are seeing with the stock. It actually hit 52-week highs, might even be all-time highs. It was just a penny under $40, and then it eased back with the market getting pulled. But this is a company that I think is really hitting it right now, John.
Indeed, this one is. And it's pretty good to see, Pete, because to compete against Jeff Bezos, because when we say Whole Foods, you're competing against Amazon.
Yeah.
And these guys have been able to do it. And again, I think that's a tribute to great sourcing of the food products that they put on the shelves, Pete, and, keeping a close eye on those bottom line numbers. Yeah. All right, let's talk about hockey, Pete. Mark and I talked about hockey when you were out. We talked about Minnesota being Hockey Town, USA, and all that kind of stuff. What do you got as far as NHL news for us?
Well, John, everybody would probably be expecting football news, but we covered a lot of that yesterday with the draft, everything else. But I will say this, the NHL is rocking, and we are seeing a lot of parity. That's great. We're also now seeing, for the first time ever, the possibility of a black ownership group, John, going into Ottawa, the Ottawa Senators. And this guy, his name is Nico Sparks. He's leading the charge. Pixel Lime is the company he comes from. There, he's the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. There's a lot of money, and there's a nice big consortium of a group of guys going after this one, John, including most recently, just yesterday, Snoop Dogg. He threw his hat in the ring as well. So it's kind of cool that these guys have all gotten together. They're trying to, pool the money, because this is a fairly significant amount of money that they're going to have to pay. Now, it will be the most expensive bought team ever. That being said, you've got a lot of different teams that have a value now. They were bought much cheaper, but a value now, like the Rangers and some of the different groups out there. I think the Rangers, estimated by Forbes at around $2.2 billion. This is likely to go for $1 billion. But wait, it might not go to these guys. Sparks and his whole group, they're all excited about things. There's also somebody out there, the Remington Group. Well, if you don't know who that is, I think you probably would recognize the name Ryan Reynolds, because he's a part of this whole thing. And they're going after Ottawa as well. What happened was the owner had passed away, and now it was up for sale, and it looks like we've got two going after it. I don't know what that's going to do to the numbers other than go higher, but it might go north of $1 billion, John. And I think Ryan Reynolds, he is a Canadian guy, so, you can understand his love of hockey, his love of Canada, and the opportunity maybe to be an ownership here. That makes it pretty interesting. My guess would be they're going to be more aggressive than the Sparks Group, but you never know. And maybe they get some sort of a flame and say, you know what, we're going to go it, and we're going to go even higher. But we'll see. I think it's going to be a great bidding war. So if you had to bet, John, who do you think right now will actually execute and be the new ownership?
I'm right with you with the Remington Group, Pete. And Ryan Reynolds, of course, he bought a soccer team in Europe, paid just a couple million for it, Pete. It wasn't one of those, multi-billion-dollar clubs like Arsenal or Man U. Instead, this was a cheap club that had been relegated, meaning they're down. And they actually won the league this year, their lower league, not the upper league. They don't play those teams. That's the way they roll over there, Pete. Mm-hmm. Because if in soccer you don't finish in that upper echelon, you get relegated to the lower echelons. Depending how poorly you do, you could be 4 or 5 levels down. And that's why those teams go for next to nothing. Well, Reynolds bought them, turned them around with his partner, and now they won the championship. So they've moved up a level for next year. In other words, here's a guy that puts his money where his mouth is. He owns Mint, which is that cellular company, Pete. He made a lot of money in aviation gin. Business-wise, this is one of the smartest people in Hollywood, even if he's not in Hollywood, even if he's in Vancouver, because, by the way, that's his Twitter handle, I think, Pete, is Van City Reynolds, which is, Vancouver City. But anyway, the thing about the Senators that I would be concerned about is, are those people in Ottawa able to afford the more expensive tickets that you need to have to compete with the likes of Tampa Bay, Boston, the Rangers, teams that do very, very well at the gate, because this team has almost $500 million, Pete, in debt. So when that guy passed, he left a team loaded with debt, which is why they're going to have to sell it, because they owe $450 million plus. And depending on, does this thing go for 700 million, 800 million, $1 billion? Maybe. But, again, I'd have to have a very sharp pencil to figure out whether or not you can actually make money in that stadium with the crowds knowing how much you can charge, or whether or not this is a vanity play. So if they outbid and go crazy, it's a vanity play, and I'd fade it.
I would say most of these guys are vanity play anyway, though, John, to be honest with you. I mean, that's it's part of the game of being an owner of any sports team. It's like, hey, man, 99% of it, it's not necessarily about money. That's why they made the money to be able to do this, to have this little thing, this little shiny object over here. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a vanity play no matter what. I got one little fake thing. I faked you out. I'm going to talk about one NFL thing for you real quick. The Green Bay Packers, we talked about him yesterday. Well, obviously Aaron Rodgers no longer there. He goes to the Jets, but he gets Alan Lazard. Tried to get a couple other players. He just signed, or they just signed, but who do you think told him? Billy Turner, one of the offensive tackles. I know this kid. That's why it was interesting for me, John. He grew up literally 3 miles from me in Minnesota. Great kid, played for the Packers from 2019 to 21. Last year he played for Denver. I think he's going to be pretty excited to join Aaron Rodgers, and I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be pretty excited to have Billy Turner, who's a great football player for them from North Dakota State. Big, tough egg, I'll tell you. All right, I said Denver. That's where he was. Well, how about the dominance of Denver's basketball team, John? They have turned into one of these teams that literally sits atop of the NBA. Now, do they have the very best record? No. But do they potentially have a great shot at maybe winning the title this year? I would say absolutely. This is why. You've got a great pair of guys. What you need is a big 2, maybe a 3, right? You talk about 3 all the time. But when you look at Jokic and what he's been able to do, John, this guy's up for MVP for all the right reasons. He doesn't just score. As a matter of fact, he's a guy who's willing to, toss the ball around. He's got a lot of assists. He's got a hell of a lot of rebounds. He's just about at the top of almost every single category in the NBA. The guy is an unselfish guy, wants to win. They had an unbelievable home record this past year, which is why so far they have swept the Suns in the first 2 at least at home. And now they obviously got to go on the road. Wonder how they'll do on the road. They've played pretty well on the road this year, but I'll tell you what, you've got Jamal Murray, John, who right now might be a guy who is playing at the highest level of any of the guys relative to his regular season. He was scoring 20 points in the regular season. Now he's scoring 25 so far in the postseason. Against the Timberwolves, they beat them 4-1, and now they're up 2-0 on the Suns. I think the dominance of what these guys have created is there, John. What do you think? I mean, is it going to be somebody other than Golden State, the Lakers? You could go on and on, the Knicks, the Heat, whatever. I love that Jimmy Butler with the Heat, by the way. Everybody else doesn't like him. I love the kid. I think he wants to win as bad as any guy in basketball. But does Denver got a shot, John? What do you think?
Absolutely, and they do because of Nikola, Pete. Just as you said, that dude is a 2-time MVP, and he's playing like it right now. And in fact, as good as Giannis is, and, maybe a lot of people talk about the Sixers and their center, Joel Embiid, obviously 2 great players. But if this guy wins, if he keeps winning and he is the MVP again, Pete, you know how many players have been 3 consecutive MVP awards? 4 players have done that. This would be the 4th, because it's Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, and Larry Bird. That would be pretty damned impressive, Pete, if he joins those guys. He would be the 4th. And the way he's playing with the amount of rebounds and assists, and he's just a workman player, but he just gets it done. So, yeah, I got to go with you on Denver on this one.
Yep. Should be fun. I'll tell you what, The NBA actually is putting it together in the postseason pretty nicely, John. It's been kind of fun to watch. And like I say, that Miami team is fun. I love watching them. I think they're, Jimmy Butler, you had him in Chicago. We had him up in Minnesota. He's been everywhere. And he works so hard that the other players sometimes hate him because he wants everything that he's putting into it. He wants them to do it too. And sometimes that kind of rubs people the wrong way. So he's not always liked, but I love the guy.
Yeah, 56 points too, Pete, the other night. I think I have a picture with Jimmy because a friend of ours, Kristen Kaliga, signed him. She was his agent, I believe, Pete. And I think I have a picture of Jimmy Butler and moi that I'll have to see if I can get and post into this maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
Bang.
Yeah. Way to go,
Well,
Jared. It's on you.
As always, folks, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much for that. We encourage you to tune in tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the Rebels Edge. We'll see you then.